So today we're going to talk about, so we talked about monopolies and how they price, how much they produce, and today we're going to talk about how they design the products that they sell. So in particular, we're going to talk about the monopoly's choice of non-price characteristics. Just as the monopoly problem helps us think about policy areas because the government affects prices, similarly, the theory of how a monopolist chooses non-price characteristics will help us think about the analysis of public policy issues, where the question is not just something like taxation, but is it the broader design of policy. And in fact, there's going to be a problem associated with this lecture at some point down the road, probably not next week, but the week after, that will sort of ask you to think about government policy using some of the tools from this lecture. So we're going to look at this from a variety of perspectives. We'll think first about the goals that a firm has in designing its goals for designing its products, and the tools that it uses to do that. We'll then talk about Spence's theory of the quality of choosing monopoly, which hopefully you read about if you had enough advance warning. And we'll talk about the differences between marginal and average consumers and how that's related to the optimal choice of product characteristics. We'll then talk about Kellen's model of spatial competition and relate that both to political and newspaper competition. We'll then talk about what are called platforms, which is where the characteristics that the firm uses to design its product are actually determined by the user base. And then about what happens when the users are different in terms of the contributions that they make to the characteristics of the platform. And we'll talk about applications of that to insurance products, loans, and platform industries. Yes? What's a platform? Platform is just a firm whose characteristic, it's going to be very, very clear in one slide, so let me just go ahead. Okay, so in considering products, there are really two crucial considerations. First, what are the firm's goals in determining the design of its product? And those can be to keep costs low and to keep prices high, so that's obviously an important goal. Second is to attract as many consumers as possible to pay those prices at those low costs. And the third, and this answers your question, is that it wants to attract the most valuable and avoid the most costly consumers, either because those consumers are directly valuable or costly to the firm, or because other consumers care about who else is using the product. And that is the definition of a platform. So when there's consumption externalities like that. Now, yeah?
How do you define the most valuable?
So if you are a newspaper, you want to attract people who your advertisers want to sell to. So, women might be more valuable if you want to sell, beauty products. High-income people might be more valuable if you want to sell luxury vacation, etc. And some people can be more costly as well, right? So, if you're selling an insurance product, you don't want any unhealthy people buying it because they're likely to be expensive to cover, right? The firm also has a number of tools or instruments that it can use to achieve these goals. So it can directly adjust price, but we've already talked about that, so we're not going to be talking more about that today. It can also do things that are sort of beyond the basic charges. So it can do things like price discrimination, right? I think that was a little depressing. It can, and I won't focus that much on that today, but actually all the principles that I'm talking about today are going to be about sort of like non-price characteristics, but they're all going to be relevant to the decisions about discriminating among consumers in terms of prices as well. And in fact, there's going to be a total symmetry between the logic of price discrimination, as you may have learned in the past, and many of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. And the firm might choose the range of products they offer. not just the characteristics of an individual product. It might choose how high quality to make a product, how easy it is to use, things like that. You might choose what niche in the market to try to occupy. So like which types of consumers to try to appeal to, what market segment to try to enter. You might think about how to advertise its product, or which consumers to send marketing materials to, how to place its product in different television shows, for example, is one way of marketing the product. But also in the context of a platform, those consumers who are part of its goals are also going to be part of its instruments, right? So consumers in a platform both play the role of something that makes them more appealing to other consumers, and are the goal, which is to attract those consumers who are then valuable as this tool to attract other consumers. So today we're going to try to learn about how to use some of these instruments for the goals and what's the logic for talking about that. Okay, so a common way of dividing up instruments is into ones that are horizontal and vertical. And David Mallison? Is David Mallison here? No? Okay. Well, a vertical product characteristic. Does anyone else want to say what a vertical product characteristic is? Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't it where it's a characteristic that everybody either thinks is good or bad?
Yeah, that's right. So everybody agrees on whether it's good or bad. And price is the simplest example of a vertical product characteristic, but sort of any sort of thing that you would call overall quality would also count as a vertical product characteristic. Speed of an internet connection, the level of insurance coverage, those are all vertical characteristics. And consumers may differ in how much value they put on them, but they all view it as positive. Adam Yavitz? Not here. Anyone else want to say what a horizontal characteristic is?
Consumers don't agree with it.
Yes, some consumers view it as good, other consumers view it as bad. So consumers often have what's called an ideal point. So that's like some ideal value of this, and they'll view any deviation to either side of that as worse. And we'll see a simple model of this below, but the type of thing we're thinking about is sort of colors, flavors, designs, styles, political bias, things that some people will view as good on the margin and some people will view as bad. But the truth is that this is sort of a very reductive way to think of things. In reality, most characteristics are what I would call diagonal. That is sort of, most people might view them the same way, right? But there will be some people who don't like them. You know, they'll have some element in which overall people like it better, but people may also to some extent disagree about how much they like it, or in sometimes view it as negative. So all of these things can be thought of as characteristics of a product, but really the key thing is not the product, as you noted. They're not really it's not really like there's a clean way to make distinction between characteristics of the products. The key is, how are the consumers heterogeneous in terms of how they value these things? So a vertical characteristic is not really an inherent characteristic of the characteristic itself. It's rather that the consumers are not that heterogeneous in terms of the values that they have. On the other hand, a horizontal characteristic is one where people are very heterogeneous, right? And so that's really the key, is the nature of the heterogeneity among consumers, not the nature of the characteristic itself. Okay, so Spence offered a very simple model allowing for sort of diagonal characteristics, sort of characteristics where people can differ in a very rich set of ways, and tried to think about how a monopoly would analyze this. And this sort of highlights the importance and the kind of crucial role that the consumer heterogeneity is going to play. So suppose that there are many different consumers, and each either buys the product or does not buy the product. This is a very inexpensive model. And each consumer gets some gross utility from consuming of U of rho, where rho is the product characteristic, and theta, where theta is the consumer's type. So this is just some set of characteristics of the consumer themselves, and these are distributed in some space that I'm not going to be very specific about, just it's Euclidean or something like that, according to some distribution of types with density f of theta. anyone who has a utility which is greater than the price for purchasing, everyone has quasi-linear utility. So anyone who gets a gross utility greater than the price for purchasing is going to choose to purchase. And therefore the sales are the integral over all the types who get a utility weekly greater than the price of the number of people of that type that there are d theta. Okay. So by Leibniz rule, we can just take the derivative of the number of people with respect to the price. And does anyone want to explain why this is the right thing? Anyone love Leibniz rule? And basically, you remember from the fundamental theorem of calculus, right? There's always two effects when you take a derivative, right? There's an effect on the interior, but here price doesn't show up on the interior, right? And there's an effect on the boundary. And what do you get on the boundary? You just get the integral of the thing around the boundary, right? That's just the fundamental theorem of calculus. So, what does that basically say? The amount that the number of people changes when you increase the price is the negative of the number of people who are marginal to participating, or not. The people who are on the boundary of the participating set, who have utility exactly equal to the price. Right? And I'm going to just label that to be the m, to be the density of people who are on the margin. Okay. So that's negative m. And then,
where's the minus in
because if you raise price, the number of people.
It's not in Leibniz's rule.
No, it is, because this is greater than or equal to price, so when you raise price, you get a negative coefficient there, right? Okay. So, by the inverse function theorem, then, we can say that if the number of people increases, the price is going to fall by 1 over m, right? So that's just turning it around so that we can do the normal sort of Cournot type analysis where we take it as a function of the quantity rather than as a function of the price.
To turn this factor around, we have to assume some sort of relationship between price and n, such as non-monotonic relationship or something? Or?
Well, I mean, by definition here, everyone is only going to participate if their value is greater than the... So, I mean, we just showed here that this is always negative, right? Because people are, just participating if their value is above the price. As the price increases, less people are going to be of that sort, and so you always get this negative relationship. Because there's no income effects here. So there's quasi-linear utility, no income effects. Everything here I'm going to say today has no income effects. Yeah?
Did you assume quasi-linear utility?
What?
Did you assume it somewhere?
Yeah, sorry, I said that. I didn't write it down. So the utility is this minus p. So that's why people participate exactly if their gross utility is greater than p. Okay, so this is called the density of marginal users. And we're going to measure everything just for convention in terms of n being the fraction of all people who participate, right? We could sort of multiply it up by anything we wanted to, and it wouldn't make any difference for the analysis. So it's just useful to think about everything in terms of the fraction of people who participate, and we'll call that n. And the cost to the firm will be a function of n and the characteristic of the product that they choose. Right. Okay. So the firm is going to make profits, which are price times the quantity minus the cost, right? And they're going to seek to maximize that. So how do they do that? Well, in terms of price, it's really simple, right? We can just ignore the characteristic of the product, and we just get the standard Cournot expression, marginal revenues, which are price minus how much the price falls times peak prime times, sorry, this should be n over n. Sorry about that. So this is how much price falls when the quantity increases times the quantity. And so that gives you just the standard Cournot formula, marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right?